public perceptions and laws of law in the courts. John Bond, of course, you all know because he writes about Congress and the presidency and polarization. His book, The President in the Legislative Arena, is well known by all of us. And Keith Poole, we all use his data. He's a methodologist, but he writes about spatial models in parliamentary voting, title of one book. Spatial Models of Choice, Polarized America, The Dance of Ideology and Unequal Riches, and I think he's going to be focusing on that today more than other topics. And Sean Theriault has a great new book. We, in fact, brought him up here to have a book launch called The Gingrich Senators, The Roots of Partisan Warfare in Congress. He writes about polarization in Congress. We're going to begin with the courts and Brandon Bartels. Brandon?
All right, so how many times do we hear it? The Supreme Court ruled today 5-4 that so-and-so and so, and Kennedy sided with fill-in liberals or conservatives, right? So we're in a situation today where we have a fairly polarized court, although probably more polarized than it has been at least since the last 70 years or so. Although it's not quite as polarized as I think that I think it will get to in a couple of years, as I'll talk about when we talk about consequences. But we're in a situation where we have 4 solid liberals, as many of us know, 4 solid conservatives, and Kennedy, who leans conservative, although is willing to be a swing vote for the liberal side on a lot of important issues, as we know, in recent years. And we also hear in judicial appointments, right, in this day and age, that presidents are primarily, almost exclusively choosing justices on the basis of ideological reliability. That is, I want justices who are going to vote the way I would want them to vote if I were on the court. Okay. What I'll talk about is, at least again in the last, I'll be focusing on the post-World War II context. In the last 70 years ago, within the last 70 years or so, this is a relatively, both of those phenomena are both relatively recent, okay? And they've come about first and foremost because of changing criteria, the laser pointer does work, of judicial appointments. The demise of patronage or political electoral considerations that were the basis of people like President Truman and President Eisenhower. Of course, Eisenhower appointed the architects of the Warren Court Revolution, Warren and Brennan. Truman appointed 4 moderate to conservatives, including a Republican, Harold Burton. Kennedy appointed a moderate, Byron White. And so, whereas in the today's in this day and age, there's almost, as I said, almost a near exclusive emphasis on what could be called ideological reliability. That is, I'm going to pick a justice who's going to vote like I will for a long time, right? No more Souters, no more Stevenses, no more Blackmans, right? And the conservatives learned that lesson the hard way, right? They had 10 straight appointments from the time Warren left the court to Bill Clinton. And those included reliable liberals, Souters, Stevens, Blackmun, moderates, and that I'll talk more about. No more swing justices. So as I'll talk about with consequences, Justice Kennedy may be the last swing justice that we'll see maybe for a long time in this age of polarized Supreme Court appointment process and polarized voting as well. Kennedy and O'Connor could go the way of the dinosaur, for instance. And of course, this change that I'll document has followed the partisan polarization we've seen among political elites in our political system more generally. No surprise, okay? So also in the age of strategic retirements, we get increasing polarization where now it's very commonplace, right? Although maybe, I don't want to name names, but maybe Ginsburg will be a key test of this. I don't want to talk about death too much, okay? But in the age of strategic retirements, where justices are retiring when a president of their ideological ilk, right, is president, right? They're waiting to retire. We will no longer, you know, the likelihood of a conservative retiring during Obama is very low, and vice versa. Two devastating ones that you can think of, although they were for health reasons, is Brennan and Marshall, both retired within one year of each other during George H.W. Bush. Souter was replacement for Brennan, which turned out to be, you know, over time, a pretty, you know, Souter was pretty reliably liberal. But of course, Thomas replaced Marshall. And so this gets to the, you know, the only way to transform, especially the ideological center of the court, is when the president of the opposite party, as the retiree or the person who passed away, leaves, right? That's the only real way to change the court, okay? So, but in this age of, like I said, where ideological reliability is almost exclusively relied upon, and in strategic retirements, we can bet on polarization on the court increasing. The result of all of this is, of course, well, I've described polarization, and another way to think about this in this context is the disappearing center, and I'll document how this has changed over time. I'll talk about the golden age of the Burger Court, where, you know, which seems like a bygone era, where there were like 4 legitimate swing voters, right? And it was harder to predict case outcomes because there were a lot of these swing voters who could go both ways. Right now we have one, of course, Kennedy. So let's talk about the shrinking center over time. This is, the center was in control. That's the last line of the Brethren, Woodward and Armstrong. I didn't only read the conclusion. But Woodward and Armstrong's Bob Woodward's and Armstrong's classic book on the Burger Court. And there's this kind of running theme about, you know, this robust middle, okay? Today's Supreme Court, of course, has low swing, what I'll call swing capacity in a little bit, but low swing or crossover potential, right? You have really reliable conservatives, really reliable liberals. They're very loath to cross over to the other side. And Kennedy is the only, you know, justice who consistently will swing to the other side. Okay. So what I call swing capacity, and I'll show you this measure over time, is in close votes, a justice is likely to go both ways, essentially, to be in the majority for both liberal and conservative case outcomes. So think of Kennedy and O'Connor, okay? So let's look at this swing capacity over time. So this a little, I showed this to some of my colleagues, and they had to stare at it for a little while before they understood what's going on. So it's kind of, there's a lot going on, but you'll get it. The y-axis here is the proportion. Sarah, you were maybe one of the ones I no, I didn't show you that.
That works great.
You can explain it to everyone. This is proportion of liberal votes by justice, okay, and then I'm doing the particular time spans where there's low to minimal turnover in membership. Okay, so this is the Vincent Court from 46 to 52 terms. The blue, and Excel, by the way, sorted this blue, liberal, red, conservative without me prompting it. They must know about this blue-red thing. The blue are liberal Supreme Court outcomes, so liberal majorities. Okay, and the red are conservative majorities. So, for instance, here's Tom Clark, Justice Tom Clark, who began in 1949 of consummate swing justice. And look, notice in liberal rulings, he's in the liberal side 80% of the time. In conservative rulings, he's on the conservative side almost 90% of the time. Okay? So in other words, your swing capacity is high when the gap between the blue and the red is large. So larger gaps, there are larger swing capacities. I've conveniently put green boxes around the ones that I think are relatively high. The point is we're going to sort of document here how the middle has shrunk over time. Okay, so we had in the Vincent era, we had a number of swing justices, high in swing capacity. Clark, Vinson, Chief Justice Vinson, Reed, Minton, Burton, again Republican, appointed by Truman, a little lower though. But I'm going to go over these a little quickly in the interest of time. In the Warren Court, what I call the first Warren, what a lot of people call the first Warren Court, 53 to 61 terms, the court's actually fairly polarized. Tom Clark, again, Justice Clark being a strong swing justice, and Stewart, who is one of the classic swing justices in the Burger Court era. I put these swing justices on kind of a pedestal, I guess, maybe, just because they're so rare now. 62 to 68 terms. Now, this was a very liberal era. So you notice, for instance, that Brennan, who was kind of a deal maker, right? Brennan and Marshall, who started in 67, had high swing capacity. Although there's a very low percentage of conservative outcomes in this era. This is the second Warren Court. Sort of when you think about the Warren Revolution, this is really the period. But also Goldberg to a slight extent, and Warren and White, Byron White to an extent. Now here we go to the golden age, which I'll call the golden age, of a strong, robust middle. Okay, so here's the 71 to 74 terms where there was no membership change, and you have four pretty solid swing voters. Stewart appointed by Eisenhower, White appointed by Kennedy, Blackmun appointed by Nixon. Of course, Blackmun becomes a solid, reliable liberal over time. Powell appointed by Nixon. Okay, so you see where the appointment slippage is occurring here too. And you have, three reliable liberals and two pretty reliable conservatives. But a strong, robust middle. That continues in the 75 to 80 terms, a long period, 6 terms with no membership change. 4 reliable moderates, same ones basically. And Stevens joins. He is, kind of a swing voter here, although he's becoming more liberal over time. Appointed by Ford, Stevens was. Burger Court, 81 to 85, things start to fall out a little bit, sort of tracking, polarization on the elite level in general. Where you have White, O'Connor not really, actually. Powell, she becomes more of a swing voter over time, actually. She starts out fairly conservative. Powell, and then in the 86 to 93 is where we see the middle sort of falling out. In any given time period, there's a lot of membership change going on here, but there's really only about 2 in each term, 2 swing voters. And then in this period, this was this long 11-term period with no membership change, where you had O'Connor and Kennedy sort of trading off, or in 6-3 they were together. But you really only have 2 swing voters there. And then in the Roberts Court from 05 to 12, Kennedy's really the only one left. These actually, we can come back to this, but this surprised me a little. I can't get my, with the conservatives over there, their crossover potential on some of those liberal cases is higher than I would have thought, but the liberals are sticking strong together. But basically, what we see is Kennedy's sort of holding the center by himself, which is the, so with the consequences for policy outputs real quickly, because I got to get through this. On the whole, we have a long period of what I would characterize as low to moderate polarization, but it's increasing, right? That middle has sort of fallen away, and it will likely continue to increase, with Kennedy maybe being the last swing justice that we'll see because of this ideological reliability model of appointment. Direction of policy outputs has largely been independent of presidential appointments. Some relation, but not as much as we would expect if based on an ideological reliability model. Here are outputs over time. This is just percent liberal rulings, and I've done a lowest smoother to pick up on the trends. A lot of this is in conjunction with what you might expect. So Warren Court liberalism, Vinson moderation, Burger Court all the way through. We get a pretty steady, center right, I would call it, right? We get some significant conservative policy outcomes, but also a lot of significant liberal policy outcomes. It's pretty even. Real quickly, of course, Vinson Court moderation. A division emerges among FDR appointees, Douglas, Black, and Rutledge versus Frankfurter and Jackson. So you can see where that the appointment slip, you kind of see where the deviations from an ideological reliability model come in, because appointments weren't based on ideological reliability for some of these presidents. Truman's moderate to conservative appointees are the result of that. Warren Court liberalism brought to you by Eisenhower, right? Republican. Warren and Brennan were appointees of Eisenhower, the architects of the Warren Court Revolution. But also FDR appointees, Black and Douglas, not Truman. Truman's appointees, 4 of whom, yeah, I'll finish up. Got the dirty look here. Kennedy mixed with Goldberg versus White. White is sort of a consummate swing voter. Johnson was a president who did emphasize ideological reliability. Also engineered the departures of Goldberg and Clark with Fortas and Marshall. Appointed Clark's son to be Attorney General, so Clark would have to resign because of conflict of interest. How come we don't get presidents like that anymore? Burger Court, center right, strong center. So again, I'm sort of putting forth kind of a normative thing here, but strong center. But if I had more time, I could talk about more of the consequences. I think for policy, the quality of legal policy, I think is enhanced by when you have a robust middle. Rehnquist Court, center right. Again, just thinking about why hasn't it been more conservative? Because presidents didn't choose solely on the basis of ideological reliability. So you got all these people who drifted left: Stevens, Souter, Blackmun, from O'Connor and Kennedy, strong swing justices. So you get a lot of potential for liberal outcomes here. Yeah. Really the only one that's making it center right. If he's replaced, or if a liberal is replaced, I think you'll have much more more extreme outcomes. So just real quickly, I'll finish up here. I talk about some consequences. I think it's troubling that we have just one person in the middle. Kennedy is probably the last swing justice. So if ideological reliability remains the exclusive focus for presidents, I think we'll have outputs that more closely track presidential ideology. And this underscores the importance of presidential elections for the shape of legal policy. Okay, and we'll evolution of a swing justice. Also, and I'll close on this. I have more to say. Maybe we can talk in benefits of polarizations. I think Alan Abramowitz talked about some benefits. I think there are some benefits with legal clarity. So the signal that's sent to the lower courts might be clear in an age of polarization where you have tighter majority coalitions. Debates in the legal academy about popular constitutionalism, versus judicial supremacy. So people are concerned that a runaway Supreme Court. In the age of ideological reliability, we might have outputs tracking popular sentiment, which gets away from concerns about judicial supremacy. So I'll stop there and